What's going on? This is Ryan with Automatic Comics, and up next, we are going to be going over the top sales that happened last week. We're going to go through each one of these books. We're going to price them out, see how they did compared to what it looks like they should have sold for. These were the top sales from the current ongoing Comic Link auction. Let's check these out. All right, so before we get started, please remember to hit that like button and hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this. So there is a big Comic Link auction going on right now. They've got a lot of pretty cool books. This isn't one of their super high-end auctions, but still some pretty great books that are part of this. We're going to go over 15 books. We're going to price them out and kind of see how they did compared to what it looks like they should have sold for based on other sales in the market. All right, so let's get into this. This is that Comic Link auction here. You can see it's actually been going on for a pretty long time. It started on the 22nd of April and it runs until the 15th of May. I don't know why some of these run like almost a month with all these different sessions and some of them run only a week. It's strange because it seems like the big auctions that have like the really high-end books, those ones are really short. They're like a week long. And then these ones that are, they call them, focused, ones that are focused last almost a month. But so if you are interested in these, there's still a number of different auctions that are still going on right now that you'd be able to participate in. But enough of that. Let's check out these books. So the first one here that we are going to talk about is an Incredible Hulk number 181 in a 9.0. This is a pretty nice looking copy of this book. Went for $6,101. And if you think that sounds low, it's because it is. This is one that I actually looked at a little bit ahead of time. And this is actually a pretty low sale for this book in this grade. There are a couple things going on that I'm wondering if maybe contributed to it. Now, it is off-white pages. I know sometimes people get real picky about that, but it is a great presenting copy from a little bit of a distance. So I'll say that, like, the colors are incredible on this copy. The deep reds, or the orange is almost like a deep red. But the thing I noticed, there are a couple of these little like folds in the corners. There's this one down here. There's this one up here. And that's the thing. There's just like the standard little bit of damage along the spine, which goes with the 9.0. The question is this additional damage that happened in the case? Maybe that hurt the sale a little bit. I don't know. It's hard to say for sure. But overall, from a distance, when you're not looking at these little corners, a solid looking copy of this book. So let's go over to GPA. GPA is one of the tools that I use for pricing out comics. It's the one I probably use the most. And if we go down to a 9.0, you can see the last sale just in April, $6,600. This one went for $6,101. So let's dive into that a little bit more. And we see that that's $6,100 sale. Now, the one thing I'll say is, and I think some people know this, Comic Link sales don't get pulled into GPA. I don't know exactly why. I think they have their sales as like proprietary. They don't want to give those sales numbers out to other platforms and whatever. So I don't really care. Doesn't matter to me, but I know some people get really hung up on that. But that's why I say, like, if a sale happens on Comic Link, if you didn't see it, it kind of disappears and then people don't really know about it anymore. But you can see lowest sale since 2020, like 6,100, lowest sale since 2020. So to me, low sale for that book. It's possible it's because of that damage. Like, if I would have looked at the sales for this book in a 9.0, I would have said a 9.0 would go for, you had the $6,600. Like, this is a pretty low sale there. Where was that? This is on Heritage. Like, this is a pretty low sale for this book and white pages. Like, that was a low sale for that book, especially with all the hype around Wolverine and Deadpool right now. I would have had this book going for probably $7,400, $7,300, something like that. So this one, underperformed by about 20%. This one went pretty low. Probably more like 16%, somewhere in that range. But I feel like this one went pretty low. All right, let's move on to the next one. Fantastic Four number 5, first appearance of Doom, a 4.5, going for $6,127. On the surface, that also feels low, but let's go check it out. So if we look up Fantastic Four number 4, that first appearance of Doom, and like we said here, or sorry, number 5, went for $6,127. We'll go to number 5. 4 is for Submariner, but 5. So 4.5, last sale $6,900. So again, 6,127, definitely lower than that last sale. Let's see compared to other sales. And again, this one, lowest sale. you know, and so it's one of those things where I mean, I've talked about that. Like you really do seem to need to go back to these 2020 prices and kind of look at where these prices are from there and decide if you want to bid on that book. Now, if we go back to 2020, this book was probably, I mean, it had this big sale here for 6,000, but maybe like a $4,800, $4,700 book. This one went for 6,127. So it's still above that 2020 price, but the lowest sale that we've seen in 4 years. So just one of those things to consider with this book. If I would have been pricing, this one out beforehand based on these sales and this last sale, I probably would have said about 7,000. And so again, this one, going $900 under, that underperformed by about 12%. Not a big deal, but still underperformed. And I could see this one continuing to drop a little bit more. All right, next one here. Amazing Spider-Man #1 in a 2.5. Let's take a look at this book. I mean, it's a little rough. You've got this wear on the edges, the Marvel chipping, little piece down here. It's not super bright, but it looks like it's attached. I mean, it's a pretty, for a 2.5. And again, you got to think about that. As a 2.5, this is a pretty solid looking book. Went for 6,388. Now, for comparison, I sold a 0.5 back during the comic boom for, I think, around 7,000. So this book definitely has corrected since the comic boom time period. But let's look at Amazing Spider-Man #1 in a 2.5. Like we said here, we had it going for 6,388. We go down to a 2.5. Last sale 6,000. So it was above its last sale. We had a 2.0 at 5,400, a 3.0 at 7,800. So if I was pricing this one out, and kind of like looking at where this book was previously, I would think this book is probably worth around 6,300. I mean, especially if you look at that general trend this book had been following, I would have said this book was probably, a little above that 6,000. Like 6,000, I feel like was a good deal. I'd say about 6,300. Went for 6,388. So to me, this one went right in line where I would have expected this book to go. All right, next one. And it doesn't feel like a real risky book at that price point. I feel like that's about where that book should be. All right, now let's look at Fantastic Four #1 in a 1.8. Went for 6,566. Definitely a book that has corrected pretty significantly. So Fantastic Four #1 in a 1.8. And again, that one went for $6,566. So let's go down to the 1.8 last sale, but this was in October. I mean, that was like 7 months ago. So take that for what it is. And so this one, and that was actually a little bump up in the price. So I wouldn't have been surprised. Well, let's look at some other grades. I mean, we got the 2.0 went for 93.32. So that's about 4,500, 4,600 a point. A 1.5 went for 6,000. That's about 4,000 a point. So I would say it's probably somewhere around 4,200 a point. At 4,000 a point, it would have been about 7,600, I think, something like that. And so it seems like this book should have been going for around 8. I mean, but look at this, like a 3.0 going for 3,000 a point. There's a lot of price compression. I mean, look at that. We have a 3.0 at 9,200, a 2.5 at 10,200, a 2.0 at 9,300. So that's getting a little tough on that pricing down here. Like in the lower end, this book is got a ton of compression. What I mean by that is it means it's selling for about the same price across multiple grades. So taking away price compression, I would think this book should probably go for around 7,000. This $7,000 price point seems about right. Just because, like, I mean, this 3.0 at 9,200, maybe that was just a great deal. I don't know. But this feels like it should be around a $7,000 book. Sold for 6,566. So to me, this one underperformed a little bit. That's not a lot. That's like what, 5 or 6%. But if we take a look at a 1.8, we see there's not a lot of sales here. It's kind of hard to say. But it does feel like this is around where it should be, that last sale, around 7,000 to me. And especially with, the potential for the hype with Fantastic Four, I think people are starting to feel a little better about it now that they know they've got Norrin Rad coming out in this movie as well. So definitely one where I could see this one picking up again. And so I think 7,000 is about what this one's worth, and 6,566 feels like a pretty safe buy, especially for, a book that looks pretty good for a 1.8. It's got a lot of spine wear, it's got some chipping and all that, but looks pretty solid to me for a 1.8, not missing any big pieces on the front, anything like that. All right. Next one, Tales of Suspense, number 39. First appearance of Iron Man in a 4.0. It's got half of a quote over here. A lot of times people are looking for that double quote where you've got the two quotes here. It's got a little bit of the blue under the table down here. That's the other thing people are often looking for, just where you're trying to get that good square cut on the book. But for a 4.0, decent looking copy. It doesn't look like it has a lot of wear to it. Maybe it's detached at this top staple. That staple looks a little like it could be a little rough, and some spine wear. But overall, pretty decent looking copy. So let's take a look at Tales of Suspense, number 39 in a 4.0. Again, this one went for $7,834. So what is a 4.0 going for supposedly right now? So again, if we look at this, like a lot of price compression here. Look, a 5.0 went for 9,000, 4.5 went for 10,895, 4.0 went for 10,500, then a 3.5 drops down to 6,600, a 3.0 6,900. This February $10,500 sale feels very high. This one even feels pretty high. Now this, I don't know. Let's see where this 5.0. The 5.0 looks a little like that was probably a pretty good deal. Feels like it's a little under what I would expect it to be based on the kind of the trend of this book. So I feel like this one may be a little low. Maybe that one should have been like 10.5. Then this 4.5 probably a little high. Maybe that should have been like 10 or 9,500. This one should probably be around 8. I think the 4.0 should be around 8,000. And this one went for, wrong one. And this one went for 7,834. That's pretty much right in line. $166 below is 2%. Like that's about as close as you can hope to get. So I would have valued this book at 8,000. That's really where I would have put it. I think it was just, this book is too high right here. Now that is the low, right? Like that is the low again, going all the way back to 2021. But this feels like a pretty safe pickup to me at this price point. I wouldn't be too concerned about it. All right, now you saw the little preview of this one. Tales to Astonish, number 27, first appearance of Hank Pym, not necessarily Ant-Man, but Hank Pym. And so this is a 7.5, which is a tough grade for this book. This book is exceptionally hard to get in nice condition. You can see this one actually looks very nice. It just has some tanning along the side here. You can kind of see it in the lettering there, but overall, this is and you can definitely see the tanning more in the back. This is a great looking copy of this book. So a 7.5, Tales to Astonish, number 27. I think I might have said Tales of Suspense. I had the Iron Man book on my brain there. So let's look at Tales to Astonish, number 27. That first appearance of Hank Pym at a 7.5. Now this book went crazy during the comic boom. Look at that, 16,000. That was that peak sale, 16 grand. But look at this. Like, where did this one sell? 9,000. This book, that's not too far off. Now, granted, this book hasn't really done a lot, it seems, since about 2013. Look at this. 2013, and that's probably right when we had that Ant-Man movie, would be my guess. 10,000, then 12,000, 9,000, almost 10,000, 12,000, 10 or 11,000, 9,000. This book has been basically flat for over a decade. So it doesn't seem like it's like if you want to pick up the book, if you like Hank Pym, if you like Ant-Man, that kind of thing, go for it. But doesn't really seem like it's in terms of investment books, like a great book to buy. Now, this one, we said it went for $9,001. Same as 2020, not the low. You have to go back to 2019. But one of the lower prices for a while. If I would have priced this book, man, I probably would have priced it around 10 or 11. Yeah, look at this. Like an 8.5 went for 25,000 just in April. Let's see about that one. Yeah, I mean, this book, it's so tough in these grades. You can tell it jumps significantly as just with single grade points. But 7.0, 8,700. Yeah, I mean, I probably would have priced this around, yeah, like I mean, like 10, $11,000. And this one went for 9,000. So again, to me, this one I feel like underperformed by about 20%. I mean, things are looking so great right here for at least for the comic link sales. I feel like people are, it's not huge deals, but everything has been around like 10, 15, 20% below what I would have estimated these books to go for. However, it's not a huge shock, like especially because I think people didn't like that last Ant-Man movie. I think that really is going to hurt the value of this book. Um, it had a $9,900 sale in April, goes down another 10% down to 9,000. I don't know. Feels like an underperformer to me, especially because this is a really good looking book. All right, let's go to the next one here. I think this is the only Golden Age book that I'm talking about in this one. There weren't any really high dollar Golden Age books in this auction. And this is the only signed book I'm showing just because I wanted to show a Golden Age book. I did not include some of the other signed books, like there was an AF-15 that was signed, just because the pricing is a little trickier. But this is a 0.5 incomplete signed by Stan Lee, which is pretty cool because this is the first Stan Lee work in comics as well. So this is a cool one to have signed by Stan Lee. It's a brittle pages. Centerfold has been replaced by Fantasy Masterpieces #3. Interesting. I'm almost surprised they didn't give that like a green, and because it's like married. I don't know. That's a little weird. That's weird. But that's strange. To me, that's strange that they didn't put like the green and yellow label on this one. But regardless, it's a 0.5. You could just take that out and it's still a 0.5. So it's a 0.5 signed by Stan Lee, Captain America #3. So let's go check that out. And it's also, to me, it is one of the coolest Schomburg covers that is out there. I think it's got just about everything going for it. You got that first Red Skull cover appearance. You got the good girl art, like bondage type cover. You got Bucky tied up there. You've got Cap jumping in. Oh, it's signed by Joe Simon too. So double signature. So signed by Joe Simon and Stan Lee. So I don't know if there's maybe this one has sold in the past or not. Let's see. Nope. Yeah. So this has not sold before. We do have a 0.5 incomplete that sold in August, like centerfold missing for 15,000. Now that was very high in my opinion. That I remember that sale. I think that was on Comic Connect. Pretty sure that was Comic Connect. And that sale was really high. And people were trying to ask like crazy numbers for this book after that sale because that sale just seems so out of line. Because look at this, like in April, we had a 1.8 go for 15. This is more in line with what I would think this book is worth in a 1.8. So a 0.5, I probably would put a 0.5 around 10 because it's one of those things where it's going to have a very high barrier to entry. And so I think a 0.5 somewhere between 9 and 10,000 in that range. And this one went for 9,101 on the low end. Plus it's signed by Stan Lee and Joe Simon. It's brittle pages. I get it, but it's a pretty decent looking copy. I mean, like, look at this thing. Like, it's a pretty solid looking copy. Yeah, it's like split spine. There's some tape and that kind of thing, but it doesn't look like it's really like flaking off on the interior. It's just got a little bit of a fragile spine there. I've said that before, like with brittle, you can have a huge range of page quality with brittle, and they'll just slam you if like just part of it is brittle. So if I would have known about this one, I'd have bid on this book. 100% I would have bid on this book. Like with those two signatures on this, like I would think this is like, even with brittle pages, I don't care. This is like a $12,000 book. Like that's cool to have these two signatures on there. I think this is a big underperformer, and I would not be shocked if we saw this book pop up for sale. Like somebody picked it up and they're going to flip it. But I mean, that's a cool book for 9,000, 100%. I would have bought that book at that price. No question. And so that was like 25% under. To me, this is a big underperformer. If I was a seller of this book, I'd have been disappointed. I would have been very disappointed with this sale, in my opinion. All right, next one. Oh, I did put one Amazing Fantasy on here, Amazing Fantasy 15 on here though, just because I thought this was pretty interesting because this is a big sale for a 0.5 that looks like this. Now, as a 0.5, I think a 0.5 anywhere from about 12 to 15,000 in that range, but not this 0.5. like to me, like 10,000, that's a big number for this 0.5. Now it's not incomplete, so that's a big selling point for it. It's not like it's missing a page or, anything like that, but it's really like visually, I mean, Spider-Man looks good, but you don't have that Amazing Fantasy on the top. I mean, I think that is a big, big detractor for this book. But let's go look up Amazing Fantasy 15. So we got Amazing Fantasy 15 here in a 0.5, and not a good looking 0.5. I'll say that. Like, it's not a good looking 0.5. I mean, last sale, 10,500, which to me, honestly, I think feels a little low. Like I said, I think that's on the lower end. I think 12 to 15 is really where I'd price the base, like the bare price for this one on a respectable looking 0.5. I mean, we have the 1.0 that went for 12.7. The 1.5 went for 14,569. So it might be a little high there. I'd say probably leaning a little more towards 12, maybe 12 to 13, depending on the appearance of the book. But this one is on the much lower end of that appearance side. So, I mean, I would have probably put it around 10. Like I would have put this one around 10, and it went for 10,361. So to me, this one went right in line with where I would have estimated it based on just this appearance here. But that's my take on it. All right. Avengers #1 and a 7.5. Very nice grade for this book. Let's take a look at it. This is a good looking book. I mean, it looks like maybe there was some color touch on this copy. I mean, look at this down here. This feels like color touch removal. You look at like when you have like a straight clear line like that and these like little specks on the side, feels like somebody had touched this book up at some point. Someone resubmitted it, had the color touch removed and got a 7.5. Now this is an older grade, so that was probably done a while ago, but I feel like this color touch. But let's take a look at Avengers #1. So Avengers #1 in a 7.5. And so this one went for 11,350, and last sale 11,100. So pretty much in line with that. I mean, you had these huge, like maybe those were White Pages copies or something. Like, oh my gosh, like why are those spikes? There's not even so I don't know where it's sold. It's not like that, feels questionable at best, where you have 11,000, 24,000, 13,000, like something doesn't feel right about that sale. I mean, this one back in 2022, that's like in February as well. Like that's peak comic boom. Like I can, and it's White Pages. Like I can kind of see that. That other one though doesn't feel right to me. I don't know. Maybe it was a White Pages copy or something, but I don't know. That one doesn't feel right. So I would have priced this book. I mean, it seems like it's been kind of flat. Like I'd price it at 11,000. I'd have priced it at 11,000. It went for 11,350. So pretty much right in line. I feel like this one went for about what it's worth, a little bit above what I would have valued it at, but close enough for an $11,000 book. All right, next one. This is pretty cool. A 9.8 Hulk 180, first cameo appearance, Wolverine, So let's take a close look at this one. We got this 9.8. I mean, a little soft corner up there. It's hard to see on the spine. You can't really zoom in as much on these as you can on like the heritage listings. Overall, a decent looking copy. I can't tell if there's anything going on in that corner there or not. But decent looking copy, so this one went for $14,250. So let's look at Hulk number 180. And so Hulk number 180, 14,250 for a 9.8. I mean, that's a big drop, but that was a year ago. So a year ago, this one went for 24,000, went as high as 40,000 in the comic boom. Just wild. But let's go back to 2020. Like where should this book really legitimately be? And in 2020, this was a $10,000 book. 2019, $7,000 book. 6,800 to 5,500. I mean, reality is this book is probably like a $10,000 to $12,000 book. Like once all the corrections and everything are done with it, like right now. Now, based on, I almost feel like because it was so long ago, we have to look at some other sales. So like a 9.6, this one, I mean, as low as 4,800, like probably about a $5,000 book right now. It is still a little above where it was really in 2020. I mean, actually quite a bit above, maybe like 30% above where it was in 2020. So if I was going to look at the 9.8 and I'm going to look at a 2020 price, I'm going to say like 30% above that, I would have valued this one around 13,000, maybe 13,500. And what did it go for? 14,250. So to me, a little bit above where it maybe my estimate would have been, but I still feel like this could drop more. I mean, I legitimately think based on what we see here, this still feels pretty elevated. And I think somewhere like 10 to 12 is where this book bottoms out. Not like a super risky buy here at 14,250, but I could see this one bottoming out around 10 to 12,000. All right, next one. Amazing Spider-Man 129. We're getting into some pretty expensive books here, a 9.8. This one is off-white to white pages and went for 18,250. Based on what I've seen with other books, that sounds about right. I mean, there was a Comic Connect sale of a 9.8, an off-white to white pages that went for just around 18,000, and a white pages that went for 28. To me, that white pages sale was just insane, like pure insanity. But the off-white to white around 18. I mean, so that's why this isn't a big surprise. I mean, now we had an April sale, 2,000 or 21,000. Here we've had a low of 18,000. Here's, let's see if it was this a white, yeah, white pages, Comic Connect, 28,750. This is the one I'm talking about. I mean, look at that, 28,750. This was also Comic Connect, 18,100. Now it does look a little faded, but when you actually look at, I think when I looked at the CGC scan, like something just wasn't great about this scan. I think the person who got this probably got a pretty good deal on it, at least comparatively, but not versus what I think this book is going to drop to. So if I was going to value this book right now, I'd probably value it around 20,000, based on the 18, 21, this sale is just wild. I would have valued it around 20,000 and it went for 18,250. So a little bit of an underperformer, but not like a big shock to me. But when I look at the prices up to the comic boom, I mean, this book in 2019, I mean, this is like a $13,000 book, 2020, maybe $11,000 to $12,000 book. So I don't know if it goes all the way back there, but just looking at where it might be today, I mean, 14, 15, somewhere in that range, I think this book is going to continue to drop. I mean, and this doesn't really have like a strong uptrend on it. It feels pretty flat. Like I wouldn't be surprised if it drops even more than that. But I feel like this book has some pretty serious downside. Whoop, not this one. I think this book has some pretty serious downside potential to it. I mean, it feels like a deal, based on those other sales, but I think it could drop quite a bit more. All right. Not a grade you see too often with this one. Justice League of America, #1, not the first appearance of the Justice League. It's Brave and the Bold, but still pretty cool book to get in grade. To me, it's a very boring cover. I mean, it's got the gray background. They're just sitting at a table playing. It's not really checkers, kind of chess. I don't know. But I think it's a boring cover. That's been my take. I think a lot of the DC #1s are just terrible covers. But let's look up Justice League #1. And so this one went for $19,006. And that shows you how difficult this book is in grade. So if we go to Justice League #1, and I know last sale, I mean, 2 years ago, 21,000. Peak Comic Boom, 37,000. Look at this, like 2017, like when Justice League was big, 25,000. I mean, this is another one of those books that feels like, I mean, it's probably like a $20,000 book and it's just going to stay a $20,000 book. And this one went for 19,006. I mean, so a little bit of an underperformance, 5% under, but I feel like it's kind of what it's worth. And I don't really see this book unless James Gunn like has some big impact on DC, and because those movies can impact this stuff. Unless James Gunn has a big impact on those books, this kind of feels like it's a $20,000 book for the last decade, and it just had some spikes around the boom and around, Justice League movies and that kind of thing. All right, we're into the top 3 here. Got a giant size X-Men #1 and a 9.8. One of the most talked about books right now because of that 9.9 that is out there that is coming up on the Comic Connect sale that I think is in June. So 19,319. Like, I know that's still trending down. And I mean, I know everybody's loving X-Men 97 right now. And so they think maybe that's going to, help the book, but I mean, maybe it's selling more copies, but I don't think it's really, it doesn't seem to be helping the price. Because look at this. I mean, last sale, 24,000. I mean, look at this, just this year, 24, 34.5. This had to be white pages. Yeah. 34.5, 22. I mean, this is the lowest sale going back to 2020 again. I mean, but still, I think it could drop more. And so, yeah, I mean, this is a good looking copy. Yeah. So I had checked this one. It doesn't have any of that damage on the right edge that I often see with this book in the case. Like, for whatever reason, the CGC cases, they often do that damage over there. Pretty nice wrap as well. Bright reds on this one. Like, this is a good looking copy of this book. This really is a good looking copy of this book. Went for 19,319. If I was pricing this one out before seeing that sale, I mean, I probably would have priced it at like 23,000. And so this is a big underperformer. This is like 18%, give or take. Let's close that out. This is like 18% or so. I mean, to me, it's a pretty big underperformer on this book. But when I look at what this book was going for, like, I remember bidding on these in 2019 and just like, and thinking like, oh, I can't, it's too much. It's too much. And then it jumps up to like, I think the peak sale here was 72,000, and there might've been an even higher one during the comic boom. But I mean, look at like 2019, this is like a $13,000, $12,000 book. 2018, it's like a $10,500 book, give or take. So if I was going to look at this book today, I mean, if it's probably, it's tough to say here. Like, I think it's probably a $16,000 to $17,000 book, somewhere in that range. If you kind of like follow this, like I like to follow trends, and I know some people hate that, but I don't know. That's what I like to do. I like to follow trends. And so if I see that general trend and, what we're potentially getting with the X-Men, and if people will hopefully like the MCU, like the MCU starts putting out something good again, you look at that kind of trend there, it's below what these prices are at, in my opinion, quite a bit below what those prices are at. I think 17, somewhere in that range, 16, I mean, even maybe a little lower, but 16 to 17,000 is where I'd put a 9.8 right now. And so, yeah, like compared to this sale, this $24,000 sale, this looks like a great buy, but I still think there's probably around a 10 to 13% or so downside risk on this book. Not a super risky buy. I think that can be caught up over time. But I think the book could go lower. All right. Next one, 9.4, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #1, 21,750. This is another book that has been definitely correcting, and because I want one, I really do. I would love to get a first print of TMNT #1, but it is one of the books that got the most overheated during the comic boom, and so I have just been being as cautious as possible with it. Last sale, 24,000. 21,750. I mean, this has been the trend in this auction. Like, the best that we've seen has been like right or in line, like maybe beating my estimate by like 3 to 5%. But on average, they've been going 10, 15, 20% below either last sales or what I would estimate the book as. And so this one, 21,750. Again, you got to go back to 2020 to get to a price that is below that. Like pre-comic boom. I mean, this is even comic boom already. I mean, this was one of the first books to move. So pre-comic boom, you really have to go back to maybe 2019 and say this was like a $10,000 to an $11,000 book. Now, this is a high demand book. Even though prices, are correcting, I would think this book would gradually trend up in this time period. And so I probably would price this book maybe around 14 or 15. And I know that that's going to sting some people out there, but for a 9.4, like what I think it will correct to, I think is maybe like 14 or 15,000. What I would have priced it at today, I would have priced this book at, I'm looking at this. I think that last sale, I probably would have priced around 24, maybe 24. Yeah, I think I probably would have priced around 24,000. And, maybe like you can kind of see like it had a lower sale, maybe like 23. So I would have priced it at 23 to 24, went for 21,750. So for what I would value it at today, I think it underperformed a little bit, maybe like 8%, something like that, 5 to 8%. But what I think it could drop to, I think it could drop to like 14 or 15,000. So again, like one of those books there, I would love to get it, but I'm happy to wait. Like if the prices eventually like trend over time and they end up there and I never get it at this, that lower price, I'm fine with that. But I don't like when I'm buying books, I'm really looking at what is my downside risk. And I feel like there's still a lot of downside risk in that book. So I'd stay away from it. All right. Now the last book, this was the top sale. Now, like I said, there was a bigger sale. There was an Amazing Fantasy 15 signed by Stan Lee, but I didn't include it here just because the signatures are a little trickier for pricing. But let's look at this one. X-Men #1 in a 7.0. This is a good looking book. I mean, it's got a little chipping over here, but 7.0, solid looking book, like pretty decent colors on it. It's not the super deep green, but it's not real light either. So pretty good looking copy. So let's take a look at X-Men #1. So this is a 7.0 that went for $22,750. Let's see how that performed here. So the 7.0 last sale, 21,600 in December. So it actually beat its last sale. So that's one of these few, but not by a lot. I mean, what, $1,100, so about 5%. And if I was pricing this one out, looking at these last sales, I would have priced this one probably 21,500. We had this a little bit lower sale here, 21.6. Let's look at some other grades. We had a 6.5 for 22. That's really strong sale. I mean, especially, yeah, that's a strong sale. I don't know about that one, but we had a 7.5. No, that's a year ago. I mean, signed by Stan Lee for 50. Yeah, I mean, I probably would have priced this book. I think like 21.5. I think I would have priced it 21.5, went for 22,750. So, 1,250, about 5% over my estimate. So again, like the overall trend that we saw at least from this Comic Link auction was that there were a few books that sold right in line or very close, like within a few percent of the price that I would estimate it as. And then there were a lot of them that went 10, 15, up to around 20% below. And now the thing is, they weren't really underperforming their prices in 2020. So I think that these corrections are fine. I don't really have a problem with these corrections. These are still books these are high dollar books. They don't sell quite as often, take a little longer to correct. But I mean, yeah, some of these books. That's why I say, like, you got to watch these trends on this, like really look at where these books were before, look at that kind of the trend they were in and make your decision on if you're comfortable picking them up. Because some of them, I think still have some pretty big downsides to them. Like I think this Hulk, the Hulk 180, I think I thought maybe had still a decent downside to it. The Giant Size X-Men 1 definitely has a downside to it. The Justice League, I think, was actually a decent buy, but I just feel like it doesn't have a real great long-term potential. But overall, I mean, not a super strong set of sales that I see in this Comic Link auction. But let me know what you think. What do you think based on, going through these books, looking at the pricing and everything? Do you think that this was a weak auction? Do you think that it was, just about what you would expect? Let me know in the comments. If you'd like to see more videos like this, I got more videos over here. Got the subscription button right here, and I will see you in the next video.